Michael, thank you so much for that. So I'm so happy that when I called you on stage, or before I called you on stage, that I gave this small carve out that maybe they're not contradicting. That would have been at odds. Yeah, I totally agree. I think that security and safety are two different aspects. It's interesting how in different languages it is really, sometimes it's the same word, sometimes it's not. Having done some security work in the automotive space, I can tell you that safety and security are two very, very different things, and we treat them also very differently. So those were great comments. Thank you for that. It's a very refreshing approach to hear someone suggesting that we battle cybersecurity challenges with privacy. And we've had a chance to hear quite a few different people from government, our government, different governments, talk about the importance of regulation, talk about the importance of putting controls on the internet, putting controls on maybe freedom of speech. And I think that would set the stage for our final speaker, who I imagine has a few thoughts to share about this topic, this very topic. So please join me in inviting on stage Ms. Eva Galperin, the Director of Cybersecurity and the Head of Threats Lab at the EFF, which is the Electronic Frontier Foundation. Please, Eva.
Hey there. Hi, I'm Eva Galperin. I work for the Electronic Frontier Foundation. We are a digital civil liberties organization whose job it is to make sure that when you go online, your rights come with you. Part of what I do at EFF is I run a group called the Threat Lab, and we look at digital threats to particularly vulnerable populations. I started by looking at threats to journalists, because journalists who are doing their job well essentially anger people in power for a living. Then we started looking at activists and dissidents, also people who are speaking truth to power and often don't have a lot of digital protection when really they should. And then I expanded it out even further, out into the rights of LGBTQ populations and people in domestic abuse situations. And that's been sort of the direction of my work over the last few years. So we are gathered here at the end of the day, and I am standing between you and whatever it is you're planning on drinking this evening. So I'm going to try not to waste too much of your time. We're starting with the proposition that security and privacy are two different things, that you must choose between them, that they are diametrically opposed. I think it was Michael got up here and he said, no, sometimes they can reinforce each other and sometimes they can work against each other. You need to think a little bit about how you're going to balance these things out. But what this conversation is leaving out is, how do you make that call? How do you decide if privacy is more important in your product than security, or security is more important than privacy? How do you set things up so that they work to reinforce one another rather than undermine one another? How can you look at this in a framework that allows you to see these things clearly instead of just standing around wondering why everybody is mad at you? I have some answers. And I will try to keep it relatively quick. So we will start with a sort of definition of privacy. Privacy is not necessarily living by yourself in a shack on top of a mountain with no internet and no phone and no communication with the outside world. I really envision a world in which we have privacy, but we still get invited to parties. It's kind of the most important thing. We are social creatures. We like seeing other people. Privacy is primarily about control. It is about control of your data, control of your digital footprint, in which you understand the information that you are leaving when you move through the world, and you control who gets to see it and under what circumstances. And you understand cases in which you do not have such control. So that's really my working definition of privacy. which brings us to security. So Michael talked a little bit about the relationship between security and safety, but I'm going to go with a really simple definition of security for the purpose of this talk, which is security is freedom from threat. And anytime that somebody talks to you about privacy and they tell you this tool is going to bring you privacy, this act is going to bring you privacy, this bill is going to bring you privacy, your very first question should be, from whom? Because all privacy is relative. You can't keep everything from everybody all the time. And so what you want to know is, so who will have the data? Who will have the power? Who will be making the call? Likewise, all security is relative. If somebody comes to you and they say, I have brought you the Harry Potter's Sorcerer's Stone of Security, this will make you secure forever, your first question should be, from what? From what threat? From what risk? Is this an amulet that protects me from being eaten by lions? Is the only way that I will ever know that it protects me from being eaten by lions the fact that no one's been eaten by lions yet? Incidentally, this is the way many security products work in our field. So it's very important to think about the threats and to think about the risk. There is a big difference between a tool or a law or a method which protects you from the risk of criminal hackers, or protects you from the risk of an authoritarian government that wants your information and wants to, say, send you to prison, or the risk that an abusive spouse is going to find out where you live after you've run away from them and possibly kill you. These are all different risks with very different answers for addressing them. And pretending that all risks are the same and pretending that all threats are the same is how we end up in this sort of muddy mess of, this is the amulet of security. It brings you security now. No one's been eaten by lions. So how do we tell the difference? How can we understand the balance between security and privacy? Sometimes these things do, in fact, behave in a way where one undermines the other. For example, I don't know how many of you have been following probably not even the latest, just the last 10 years of Facebook drama. Pretty much Facebook from day one. Facebook has always had a series of problems that stem from its fraught relationship to privacy and security. One such example is Facebook's tendency to change its settings overnight and make things that were previously public private, or things that were previously private public. I think it was something like 7 or 8 years ago, EFF made a chart in which we showed how more and more and more of the settings that you had as a Facebook user were taking away your power to make things private, and that this was extremely worrisome. Furthermore, even after you have made things private, things are not private from Facebook. In fact, Facebook's entire sort of value proposition is that it knows who your friends are and who you're talking to, and it sells that information about you to advertisers. Furthermore, another place that Facebook sells all of this data to, or gives all of this data to, is it gives this data to governments and law enforcement. I don't know how many of you here are familiar with transparency reports, but probably about 6 or 7 years ago, we started seeing the sort of greater normalization of big content platforms and tech companies publishing transparency reports talking about how often they have received requests from governments and law enforcement for the user data that they have, which governments and which law enforcement is asking for it, and how often they complied. And the whole idea behind this is supposed to be this sort of pro-privacy, pro-security move, where as a user from, an authoritarian state, if you are worried that you're doing your activism on Facebook, and let me tell you, trying to do activism not on Facebook is really hard. A lot of the time, security specialists come to me and they say, why are all of these activists on Facebook? Don't they know that Facebook isn't safe? You shouldn't be putting your information on Facebook. And I tell them, have you ever done any activism? Because usually they haven't. They're doing the equivalent of living on top of a mountain by themselves, not getting any party invitations. Whereas doing activism is essentially party invitations. Nothing but party invitations, only your party is revolution. And this tends to anger governments. So if you are an activist, you can look up Facebook's transparency report. You can see whether or not Facebook has been handing over information in response to law enforcement requests to your government. For example, if you are a Russian journalist or activist, you might be very interested in how often Facebook hands over user data to the Russians. That seems like it might be relevant to your interests. Now, how does this come down to everybody in this room? How does this affect the people in this room who are often not just the users of tools, but the people who are building tools? You are the people who are making the next big companies, who are making the privacy and security decisions at these places. You're also the people who are drafting legislation. You are the people who are setting state policies when it comes to cybersecurity or even privacy legislation. What do you need to think about? What you need to think about is trust. And one of the reasons why so few people trust Facebook is that Facebook has spent a lot of time trying to obscure the trade-off that you make when you hand them all of your user data. And they've also engaged in a whole bunch of really shady practices. They've leaked information left and right, and so people do not trust Facebook. People may also not trust governments. Not all governments are created equal, and all of them have what Max Weber refers to as the monopoly on the legitimate use of violence. So I myself am extremely skeptical about what kind of powers I'm willing to give to governments, because they have the power to shoot me in the head. And I don't want to hand that power over to just anybody. Your mileage may vary. You might be, oh, no, go ahead. I'm not doing anything wrong. Me, I'm a little bit skeptical. I've seen governments do some really bad things. But if you are a policymaker, if you are a mover or a shaker at a company, if you are building a new product, what I encourage you all to do first and foremost is to earn the trust of your users. Be transparent about what information you are gathering, about who you are giving it to, about what you are protecting people from. And as long as you make those propositions clear from the very beginning and you stay consistent and trustworthy, then you will not have problems with privacy and security canceling each other out. And instead, you will have them working together. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's the most times I've heard the term "government will shoot you in the head" in the conference ever. But, okay, this was amazing. We truly saved the best for last. I want to thank each and every one of you for staying with us, for coming here. I want to reiterate the message that many gave in the beginning of this amazing planetary session. It's all about connecting with each other. I want to thank our sponsors and the team that is behind this conference for organizing it, and welcome you guys to continue enjoying Cyber Week. We have many, many more events, and of course, hopefully to see you next year. Thank you so much.